Differing theories on the future of the Republican Party in Michigan. Plus, are we in for state budget crisis? A new report. And Detroit students take news headlines and make it art. Nolan and Stephen are here, and MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Christy McDonald. Full show coming up for you. This weekend, Republicans are heading up north for the Mackinac Republican Leadership Conference. Happens every 2 years and there's plenty to talk about, including state support for President Trump, the idea of party inclusion, and the 2018 midterm elections. We'll debate the future of Michigan Republicans and some of the conflicting messages about where the party is headed. Also coming up, are we looking at some big challenges ahead when it comes to the state budget? We'll have an in-depth look at one report that outlines some tough times and decisions that will have to be made. And finally, turning Detroit neighborhoods, headlines, and history into a powerful theater experience. You'll meet the Castech students who are doing just that. It's all coming up for you on MiWeek, so let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. And we're going to start off with the Republicans heading to Mackinac Island this week and why this gathering could show us a lot about the party's future here in Michigan and really around the country. It's good to see you guys. All right, so Nolan, are you going up to Mackinac this weekend?
I'm headed up.
He's going.
There you go.
Sending someone from my staff. I am not going this year.
Nancy
Kaffir will be there this year.
I'll bring you a big box of fudge.
All right, well, we'll expect that when you come back, but we expect a little bit of insight, too, also, in looking at, you get all Republicans in one place up there on Mackinac Island. I'm going to start with you, Nolan, first. How would you characterize where the Republican Party in Michigan kind of stands right now in terms of power structure and where they're headed in philosophy?
Well, I think the Republican Party in Michigan is a lot better organized and more aligned than it is perhaps on a national level. Chairman Ron Weiser has gotten a tremendous fundraising effort going. They've got as much money or more than they had in the last cycle. They've got a good list of candidates lined up for most races. They're struggling a little with the Senate race, but that may clarify. I think they feel that they're okay. I think they feel like they're going to be okay.
Do you see some cracks, though, or some division, though? Do you still have the people who are never Trump people? Or is President Trump divided kind of where the philosophy is with the Republican Party right now?
Well, I mean, I think he's highlighted a schism that exists not just in the party, but in the country. And the Republican Party has a different burden, I guess, than the Democratic Party does in adapting to that schism. The Republican Party is not growing its base with the demographic change that is happening around the country. That's what they said in 2012 when they lost the presidential contest. They said that they needed to turn toward Latinos and African Americans and people who traditionally do not vote for Republican candidates. They've gone way off the rails there at the national level, less so at the state level, but those are the kind of things that could start to show up in the next year's gubernatorial contest, for example.
You look at their Senate lineup. They got 2 African Americans running for Senate. I don't think at the state level diversity is necessarily the issue.
It's not diversity.
And all of those things, you've got to remember, they cleaned up in 2016.
They did.
Now 2008 2018 will be a midterm election. They're running against some very traditional challenges. Midterms are always hard for the party in power. This time you're running against running with a president who has the lowest popularity ratings we've ever seen, and that's going to make it tougher for Republicans. The big variable here is always you're running against somebody, what the other side does. And if state Democrats turn themselves over to the Bernie Sanders wing of that party, I think it'll throw everything in disarray.
I want you to comment on the fact that Nolan said, well, you have African-American candidates, but how do you equate that with
what Republicans always say. So Bob Young, who is one of the African-American candidates who's announced, doesn't represent, I don't know, but even 30% of what most African-Americans feel about policy. He's a fine public servant, someone I actually like personally, but he's not representative of African Americans.
He'd get 30% of African Americans. He wins that election.
He would love that, right?
I mean,
he'll get 10%.
He's not running as a Democrat. And John James, the young man.
But part of the problem with the Republican Party is that they do constantly trot out these folks who say, look, I'm African American and I'm Republican, and they don't deal with the fundamental disconnect between the fortunes of African Americans and Latinos and Republican politics. You have a president in the White House who is openly hostile to both populations, has done and said things.
So what did African?
Well, okay, so how would you answer that, Nolan? How would Republicans counter that?
First, let me ask, what did African Americans do in the last election? They stayed home. So neither party is doing a very good job.
Well, Democrats are another issue, right?
Appealing to,
I'm not saying that they're doing a great job either.
What I think Republicans need to do to prevail in 2018, at least not to lose steam, is stick to a growth message. Jobs, jobs, jobs. You saw Bill Schuette coming out right away talking jobs, 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 growth for the state. We are not going to tax our way out of problems. We got to grow our way out of the problems. I think voters understand that. They're looking for a positive economic message, which is what they're looking for in most elections.
Do you think they're going to run into a problem, though, coming up with some of the policies that President Trump has come forward to in an increased, maybe Democratic base that's looking to show up?
So, I mean, it's really hard to predict what is going to happen in American politics right now, but all of the signals right now show or would suggest that you're going to have an increased Democratic turnout next year. That turnout is going to be angry about some of the things that Donald Trump has said and done. And Republicans in the state are going to have to contend with that in some way. They're going to have to deal with social issues like immigration, like racial justice that typically don't show up in state contests in Michigan historically, but I think they will be on the front burner.
Again, they can't run to get Democratic votes because they're never going to get Democratic votes.
But I think Democratic votes to win.
You know, you may be looking at a 2010 style election where an angry electorate just wiped out everybody. You don't know what factor Trump's going to play in the election. I couldn't tell you. I know what I'm going to be looking for up there is how these potential candidates position themselves with Trump. Do they run full-throated with Trump, or do they try to sort of nuance their message? I heard one potential candidate tell me the other day that, well, she's going to say, I support the policies, not necessarily some of his messages. I think it's going to be a struggle for a lot of people, and depending on the district, of course, and depending what they're running for, to manage that challenge.
Well, we expect a full report from both of your papers. All right. Well, turning now to money, Michigan, and what may happen down the road. For the past several years, it seems that Michigan has managed an economic rebound. We have a balanced budget, we're spending a bit more on roads and education, but according to a new report from the Michigan Citizens Research Council, which is the state's oldest nonpartisan policy research organization, Michigan could be in line for some budget trouble when it comes to paying off promises like business tax breaks and roads from the general fund. Mix in a little bit of economic instability down the road and a big question mark by federal funds, and things get pretty tight. Eric Lufer is the president of the Citizens Research Council. He explains what they found in their report, what it all means, and what kinds of policy fixes that lawmakers should be looking for.
In the last 5 or 6 years have been pretty good. Things have been growing in the state. But during that time, our legislature's built in a lot of future spending with term limits. So let's put it out into the future. I'll be term limited out. It'll be somebody else's issue to deal with. And they were also assuming that the state revenues would take off that growth would mean a lot more revenue and they could afford these things. So we kind of were watching all these things taking place, and we know a recession's coming soon. We know that all these pressures are out there, and we want the people to understand this isn't something that's just popping up on us when this bad stuff happens. It's here, and we have to recognize it now and start planning for it.
So it's kind of baked in, and it's been a little bit of finger crossing, hoping that things continue to grow, and a little bit of kicking the can down the road. So what did you specifically find that we're going to have to watch out for now in the next couple of years when it comes to the state budget?
So we have a total state budget that's almost $57 billion, but because we want certain monies to go to certain things, we want the lottery money and the sales tax money to go for schools, that goes into a separate fund. We want gas tax money to go for roads, so that goes into a separate fund. And what you're left with is a $10 billion fund that we call the general fund,
right,
that funds universities and Medicaid and revenue sharing for local governments and a lot of things like that, state police. So out of that $10 billion fund, we found that 20% of it, $2 billion, will be dedicated to tax credits, to the highway funding that was part of the 2015 package, to just a number of different things. So you're taking 20% out of the budget away, and now we know that there's a recession coming. I don't know when, I don't know how big or how bad, but it's going to make it very difficult to balance the budget going forward, and going to mean real cuts or a new tax to make up that difference.
So that's what I was going to say. I mean, where is the squeeze going to be coming in? And then how palatable, though, is new taxes? I mean, we're always hearing that Lansing, well, we want to give people a break.
Right. With this legislature, with the sort of conservative nature of the state, taxes thus far have been off the table. But it's going to take some hard choices when we get down the road. We're talking about Medicaid again. So are we going to push people off of health care? All the things that we've been doing over the last decade or so, trying to get more people covered. Are we going to push them out, leave them to fend for themselves? If we cut money for universities, that means higher tuition, or people just can't afford to go. We start cutting revenue sharing to local governments. Now there's police and fire at the most local level that we're laying off officers, and our communities maybe aren't as safe as they were. State police, it just goes down the line. Corrections is another big issue. So are we going to close prisons, put more people out on the, free to go, or condense them into fewer prisons? And we know that creates more issues.
So this report really sounds the alarm of what could be happening now in the next 1 or 2 years. What are, I guess, some of the fixes? And you say it's legislative.
Absolutely, it's legislative. They created this and they can fix it. But it's recognizing now that we have these issues and planning for them going forward, not dealing with it in a crisis mode, and then things really get bad. So the fixes, again, should there be more revenue? Since our revenues didn't grow as much as we hoped over the last 5 or 6 years with the income tax and the use tax and our corporate income tax, should we find different revenue sources, or think about the rates being levied on those types of things? Or we end up in a cutting mode, and there is the idea that government could be cut, but how are we going to do it? What are our highest priorities? Where do we get the biggest bang for the buck?
So when you issue a report like this, what kind of reaction have you been getting from lawmakers who take a look at this?
And we've been getting a very positive response, both from the general public who's seeing these things and thanking us for it, from local government communities who want to know what's coming so they can plan, be aware of it. And the executive branch, the governor's office, the state budget office, they know about these things and they want others to know about it. So they're thankful that we're getting the word out. And now it's up to the legislature really to take this on. I think the key people know about it, but are you just going to wait and let the next legislature deal with it? Or are you going to be proactive and take it on now and plan for it and be prudent about it?
Busy furniture.
All right, a little budget talk here. When I said that we're going to talk about the state budget, Nolan said, can we eat some more peas and carrots, please? Can we get our vegetables?
Can we strip the beds?
Sometimes you got to do a little work. That's all I have to say. Sometimes you have to do a little work. And, we look and things have been going okay with the budget. And, Eric talks about there. But it's this down the road that really lawmakers have to consider right now. So, and I'm going to ask you, Nolan, is it now is going to be this next generation, whoever's going to be coming in office next, are they cognizant of the problems that they could be facing?
They're going to get stuck with the bill at every level of government. When you talk about, oh gosh, we've got to spend $300 billion in hurricane relief, but we're not going to set any other spending priorities. We're just going to put it on the credit card. That's them paying for it. In Michigan, when we say, you know, we're not really going to put any money into infrastructure this year, that's the kids paying for it in the future. And I don't know how we're going to get through it. Now, Rick Snyder came into the office. He started paying down some of the long-term bond obligations. That's still underway. That's a long-term project. He says by 2035, this state will be in pretty good economic shape. I hope that's true, but this report suggests we've got some really serious headaches ahead of us.
You have two major drains on the general fund right now. One is the business tax incentives from the Granholm administration, which are now coming due, and each year we don't exactly know how much it's going to be, but there's a lot of that stuff just sitting out there for waiting for people to claim. The other is the $800 million tax break, or the $1.8 billion tax break that that Governor Snyder gave to businesses when he came in. There's nothing wrong with tax cuts or tax incentives if you pay for them. The governor tried to pay for his by cutting services that help inspire growth. So 15% cut to higher ed budget says you're not going to create the college grads who are going to help build the economy. We're doing it all sort of the wrong way. We've got to have policymakers think about what's that short-term investment, maybe a sacrifice, that yields the kind of growth that makes it so that we're not worried about
I think the governor is paying for the tax cut, paying for it with growth. We are a state that's growing, and our revenues are growing.
If you look at the holes that are showing up right now each year in the budget, and that we're having to find either new revenue or new cuts to fill, those are a result of the. It's not that there hasn't been growth. There hasn't been sufficient growth to offset the cuts that we
were losing jobs, losing businesses, losing our tax base leading up to that. And you know, his bet, and I think it'll pay off, is that we could stop that and turn it around.
Okay, so in 8 years we're not there.
We've got 30 seconds left, though, but it always makes me wonder if we're going to start to have holes like this coming up. Are lawmakers going to start eyeing that rainy day fund? I mean, when you start looking at plugging the hole, because you know, and I think that's going to be where's the will.
That's what we did at the end of the Engler administration, and set up part of the disaster of the next decade.
All right, well, we'll be talking more about it in the next coming months. You know, finally tonight, a Detroit Performs special report. A group of Cass Tech students who were inspired by what is happening in their neighborhoods and on the news used those headlines to create performance art of their own. Take a look.
We've always tried to be on the cutting edge of theater here at Cass, mainly because we're one of the few schools with a performing arts department.
I think that what's interesting about our director, Ms. McCormick, is that since she's been here, she's touched probably every musical that's out there that high schools are allowed to do, and even some that we aren't.
We've done so many things. I thought, what better story to tell than our own?
We started hearing about news in Detroit about the burning down of the Heidelberg Projects, and it was like, why not tell the story that's going around us?
As we were sitting around talking about all of this, I just thought, oh, I'll show them these pictures, because I don't know how many of them were even aware of the Heidelberg Project. But I thought it would just cause them to start thinking about things. I had no idea that it would affect them the way that it did.
We started breaking into groups, and we all picked a house. And then we picked a story to go with the house, like a family that lived there, and we had to choose who was going to live there and what they're going to go through.
I thought it's inspired by the Heidelberg Project. Wouldn't it be cool if Tyree knew about this? And so I said to the kids, find a phone number. We just have to call. And the woman I was speaking to, Margaret Gray, said, that's wonderful, go for it. And I'm going to arrange for Tyree to meet with the kids, and they can experience the Heidelberg Project.
The Heidelberg Project has always been a big thing, probably one of the many good things that Detroit has left. And so many of it was being burned down, tore down. And yet, Tyree Guyton, who created the Heidelberg Project, he's still going. We see that Detroit is being burned down. It may be physically, maybe emotionally, mentally. Now we can work with Tyree in a way of our art to build it back up.
And to see him, you know, when we were touring, to me that was so profound.
You guys are doing what you're doing. I'm so excited. I can't wait to see it.
Because he has taken such a loss on his art, but he's so determined, and he believes in this city. He believes that there is a good to be had here and that something great can come from us.
The musical is called Headlines Up From the Ashes, The Experience.
Well, you only hear the bad headlines that's coming out of Detroit right now. That's how we got Headlines, and we got the experience because we want this not to be a typical musical. We want the audience to experience something that they never encountered.
Everything is original and from the cast. The music, the choreography, the story, the characters, the story behind the houses.
This musical is going through the history of the city of Detroit and figuring out what went wrong and what has helped the city, and trying to look at those and look at that history and come up with what the city is today and trying to figure out how to get to a point of what we want it to be.
There's different stories being told in different ways, especially with our music choices. It's not just one genre. The way that the story is being told, verbally and physically, it's so different from so many other shows.
The plot of the musical is about a guy named Dustin who has lost hope. He is the epitome of Detroit now.
Just like Detroit going through wrong and right, he's battling between what's good and what's bad.
My character, Edward, he shows the good guy in Detroit, the good guy and wants better. But Dustin, he shows where Detroit is headed if we keep on acting like this.
Throughout the whole entire process, there are gods, time, love, soul, hope, and war. Throughout the play, the gods sort of mold themselves with the events that happen in the real world. If something tragic happens, the gods, they react to that all together.
We ended it off with somebody about to create a good process. We didn't end it off like the problem has been answered. We don't know the future, so we can't dictate if good is going to be at the end because we don't know. All we can do is, just like in the finale, say this is what we want in order for us to get out of the ashes that we are in. Even though, like on the poster, it doesn't say directed by Marilyn G. McCormick, I feel all of us did a little directing, but she was the guider, the top director.
What I want is this tempo.
She's like our outside eye looking in.
Come out. This is not a funeral dirge. We're not burying something at this point. We are raising something.
I would say the most challenging song in the show would have to be the finale number. We wanted it to be more like a chant. It wasn't a dragging ballad, or it wasn't, I'm happy because we are done fighting, because we're not done fighting. We are marching for the rising of our city.
One thing that we were discussing before we started creating the musical is how are people going to take it after sitting here for 2 hours and 3 acts? Will they walk away feeling like we changed their lives? And that's our main goal.
Ultimately, I want the audience to walk away from this experience knowing that we are one unit, we are connected.
I want people to know that you can fight, that something good happens here, and that we are the good that happens here.
I personally want them to walk away feeling like we can fill those empty lots, we can rebuild those houses, we can put back the Heidelberg Project and recognize the beauty that's in it and in Detroit.
I feel theater is positive to inspire someone to do that because it's real intimate and it's enclosed.
It brings people together in a way that it wouldn't normally happen.
Well, what I have taken away from the show is we are a lot stronger than we think we are, especially once we have other people that we know we can lean on. That's mainly what my ensemble has taught me. And the show itself, it showed me the beauty in Detroit and how wonderful we all are together, even though other people in other cities and other states, and they're all like looking down on us. I know that we have a lot of promise.
I want people to understand and realize that the youth aren't lost, that they have this ability to make changes, and they can follow through from the beginning to the end of something and do it well.
Congratulations to those kids. And you can see more Detroit Perform stories by going to our website, MiWeek.org. We'll have the link for you there. That'll do it for us for MiWeek. Make sure you tune in this Sunday, September 24th at 9:30 a.m. for a special American Black Journal and One Detroit Roadshow on education. Stephen and I are hosting, and we'll talk with Detroit Public School Superintendent Dr. Nikolai Vitti, parents, students, and civic leaders in Detroit's Brightmoor community. And we'll be back next Thursday for an all-new MiWeek. Until then, find us on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Christy McDonald, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.